Good morning. Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I am Glennis Peterson, your service leader for today. I'd especially like to welcome those of you who have found our channel for the first time. If you like this channel, please subscribe. We will upload new content even after we reopen our church. Now, speaking of that, I really do, as everyone else does, miss seeing all of you. We are looking forward to reopening as soon as possible, and I can tell you, the board is scheduled to discuss this topic this afternoon at their meeting. Today, we welcome Reverend Stephen Landale as our speaker. He will be available at 11:30 for our after-service Zoom discussion. You should receive a link to the Zoom discussion in an email from Julianne DeMarche. We can sign in at 11:15, and our discussion begins at 11:30. We gather this hour of people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, pain and loss. For each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Let us reach the place of self, the place that is not alien to truth. Let us wash over with peace and serenity, with fierce longing for light and heart, with living strength flowing in our veins, bringing ourselves into fearlessness and into trust.
Make channels for the streams of love, where they may broadly run, and love has overflowing streams to fill them everyone. But if at any time we seize such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be parched and dried. For we must share if we would keep this gift all else above. We cease to give, we cease to have, such is the law of love.
And now I'd like you all to sit back in your chairs or your sofa or wherever you're sitting and relax. And as you take in a deep breath, think of all of the peace and joy in this world. Taking it in and breathing out love for everyone. Continue to relax. Sink into your chair and let it hold you up rather than you hold yourself up. Relax everything from your head all the way down your neck, your back, your shoulders. And relax your ankles, your knees, your hips. Discover in your body where you might be holding tension and release that tension as much as you can. Continue breathing normally but deeply as you hear these following words. Trust is the daughter of truth. She has an objective memory, neither embellishing nor denying the past. She is an ideal confidant, gracious, candid, and discreet. Trust talks to people who need to hear her. She listens to those who need to be heard. She sits quietly with those who are skeptical of words. Her presence is subtle, simple, and undeniable. Trust rarely buys round-trip tickets because she is never sure how long she will be gone and when she will return. Trust is at home in the desert and the city, with dolphins and tigers, with outlaws, lovers, and saints. When trust brought her house, she tore out all of the internal walls, strengthened the foundation, and rebuilt the door. Trust is not fragile, but she has no need to advertise her strength. She has a gambler's respect for the interplay between luck and skill. She is the mother of love. And now I'd like to introduce Reverend Stephen Landale. He's a hospice chaplain from Eugene and a former full-time UU parish minister.
It was in the early 1990s. We were gathered 100 strong in a junior high school gymnasium with concrete walls and a gigantic rug. The local hotel conference rooms being too expensive for this particular human potential workshop. Nobody was wearing a mask. The facilitator instructed us to walk around slowly, and when he said stop, we stopped in front of one other person. After pausing a moment, we were to hold up 0 to 4 fingers representing our willingness to trust this person. 4 fingers meant, I trust you. 3 meant, I think I could trust you. 2 meant, I don't know if I trust you. 1 meant, I don't think I trust you. 0 meant, I don't trust you. Both people raised their hands simultaneously at the trainer's call. If both raised 4 fingers, they hugged. If one person raised 3 fingers and the other raised 3 or 4, they shook hands. If one of them held up 2 fingers and the other raised 2 or more, they stood pat. If either of the people raised 1 finger, he took 1 step back. If either of the people raised 0 fingers, signifies a fist, she turned her back on the other person. And then at the facilitator's call, we continued walking around, stopping in this manner about 20 times to exchange communications of trust levels with complete strangers. After this exercise, we talked about why we trusted some people and not others. I tended to trust people who maintained eye contact. When I shared this, a former car salesman laughed and said, that's the oldest trick in the book. Maintain eye contact and people trust you. Years later, I befriended a man who grew up in Okinawa. He didn't find eye contact to be trust-inducing at all. He found it aggressive, embarrassing. He struggled to maintain eye contact with European Americans because he knew that this was helpful with them, but it always felt rude to him. To him, maintaining eye contact meant staring. So one of my predominant mechanisms for determining trust has resulted, possibly, and I think, in my trusting manipulative car salesman and not trusting many Asians. I found the responses of the other workshop participants astonishing. Some people trusted women, but not men. Some people nervously admitted that they tended to trust people of their own race, but not others. All sorts of categories determine how many fingers people got. Tall people, short people, skinny people, fat people, jocks, geeks, businessmen, businesswomen, crunchy earth girls, people that remind you of your mother or your father, people who look successful, attractive people, nice eyes, blue eyes, Latinos, whites, folksy people, people whose odor you can smell, people who smile, people who seem to be shining it on too much. If this workshop were held a couple of years ago, or just before the pandemic, or sometime in the next year or two, I'm sure there would be some new categories that might trump all the others, pun intended. Is this person wearing a MAGA hat, or do they look like they could be? Is that a NASCAR t-shirt I see underneath that plaid shirt? Do I smell tobacco? Do they wear jade or camouflage green? Does this person look like one of those trust fund liberals who drive Priuses, hate my religion and my country, and look down on me? Is this one of those BLM guys who thinks it's okay to trash an entire neighborhood and tear down police departments? Is he a white supremacist? Is she transvestite? Are they a transphobic creep I need to keep away from my child? All of these are categories that we carry around with us arising from our personal histories, familial and cultural influence, possibly our religion, and increasingly our political camp. They determine in a workshop such as this whether one will raise a hand with 1, 2, 3, or 4 fingers or a fist, and in real life, whether one will ask a given person for directions, take the time to give directions, smile, or quickly roll up the car window when this person walks too close. These are some of the ways we determine if we trust someone, if we would consider hiring them as a babysitter, or take their advice, or sit down and talk with them, or kiss them and risk falling in love. What is trust exactly? Is it a feeling? We seem to think so. We see or hear or smell someone and we feel something that we interpret as trust. Then we smile, extend a hand, or we ignore them or even turn our backs. The fingers part of this exercise was contrived, but the accompanying actions were familiar. As others and I reflected on the exercise, we remembered not only our own feelings of trust, but what it felt like to have a stranger deliberately turn her back on you, or shake your hand, or even give you a hug. The facilitator, after asking dozens of open-ended questions, then dropped a bomb. He said, "Trust is not a feeling, it is an action. What you were experiencing was not trust, but your preconditions for trust. Trust is a decision. It is specific. One doesn't just trust another, one trusts another with something." My face flushed. Although it took me a while to process what he had said, I sensed instantly that he was right, that I and most of the others have been thinking about trust in the wrong way. Trusting is not feeling something for somebody. Trusting is giving them the keys to your car, or telling them a secret, or walking alone with them at night, or embarking on an important project or adventure with them. Feeling trust and actually trusting are related but distinct. We trust one another or ourselves with something. A gift is entrusted to you. In church, we entrust leaders with responsibilities, with roles, with power. We trust our teachers and childcare providers with our children. When you share something personal and private with your minister or counselor, you trust them to keep it in confidence. Now back to those preconditions of trust. Do they have a place? On what basis is it wise to trust another or oneself with something? Some people trust gut feelings. They just know. Most of us experience this at least part of the time. Unfortunately, gut reactions aren't always right. 50 or certainly 60 years ago, a large majority of Americans had a strong intuitive gut feeling that interracial marriage was wrong. Racism, classism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, and all prejudices involve strong gut feelings that are extremely difficult for logic or objective information to overcome. And of course, it's really easy to see this in others. But do you have your own immediate intuitive gut feeling about things, for instance, about someone in a NASCAR baseball hat, or who displays their love for Jesus on their t-shirt? Gut reactions need a filter of discernment. We have the power to choose to trust in a different direction than our initial feelings would lead us. We can feel a one-finger response to someone and still decide to trust that person with something. We may do so out of need. Our life situation forces us to trust somebody, and then have our preconceived notions called into question. Conversely, we can feel a 4-finger or even 10-finger response and decide not to trust that person, even with our phone number, letting our commitments, the advice of others, or our reason take precedence over our feelings. What most of us seek before making a major decision, a significant act of trust, is information. People considering a long-term partnership, for instance, may gather as much data as they can about their partner, themselves, and their compatibility. Such information can help, but ask anyone who's been married or in a committed relationship for several decades if what they knew at the beginning prepared them adequately for the twists and turns of the years to follow. Think about any major endeavor in your life. Taking a position of authority, raising a child, relocating. Do we ever really know what's ahead? Have you ever said to yourself, if I knew what I was getting into, I never would have done it, but I'm glad I did. One of my favorite writers, the poet, farmer, and essayist Wendell Berry, a novelist, has mused on this subject quite thoughtfully in his book, Standing by Words. He writes, knowledge, like everything else, has its place, and we need urgently now to put it in its place. Let us abandon our superstitious beliefs about knowledge, that it is ever sufficient, that it can of itself solve problems. Let us give up our forlorn pursuit of the informed decision. I'm going to repeat that one. Knowledge, like everything else, has its place, and we need urgently now to put it in its place. Let us abandon our superstitious beliefs about knowledge, that it is ever sufficient, that it can of itself solve problems. Let us give up our forlorn pursuit of the informed decision. Now, Wendell Berry is not suggesting that we stop thinking or that we disregard information. However, he reminds us that when we make significant commitments which require the highest levels of trust, we must do so with inadequate information. Regarding marriage, he writes, we know that people stay married for different reasons than those for which they get married, and that the later reasons will have to be discovered. So how are we then to make commitments to trust, if not relying solely on gut feelings or on analysis of information? My best answer to this question was provided by a member of a church I was candidating with in a conversation just inside the entrance to the building. He introduced himself and said, I really liked your service today, and I'm so glad you're here. But I want you to know that I decided to vote for you before I met you based on the search committee's recommendation. This brief encounter stayed with me a long time as I discerned why it felt so reassuring. It's wonderful to be liked by others and to feel a shared sense of chemistry and compatibility. It's wonderful to be respected by others. But this man's decision to support me arose not from a personal affinity or like-mindedness or anything like that. He decided to support me because he had already decided to trust the process. I think he communicated that he knew that the act of trusting is itself creative, and his decision to support my ministry, an act of trust, was based not on adequate information or personal feelings, but on his commitment to help create the kind of future he wants for his congregation. This creation requires trust. It requires faith, a willingness to risk and commit in the face of inadequate information. When his feelings happened to align with this commitment, that was merely the icing on the cake. His approach reminds me of some of the people in that workshop I took in the early 90s. A few people went around holding up 4 fingers to everyone, and therefore giving hugs to all those who also held up 4 fingers. I observed this out of the corner of my eye while I was discerning and holding up my 0 to 4 fingers. And I decided that these people weren't doing the exercise right. Maybe it could even be considered cheating. Surely they were not being honest about their trust level for each of these strangers. Excuse me while I put my cat down. Now I see things differently. In fact, even though she's never done a workshop like this, I'm pretty sure the woman I married, Heather, would have been one of those workshop participants holding up 4 fingers to everyone. She clarified for me when preparing the sermon that she might have held up 3 fingers for some people, but I know her handshake would have been a warm one and come with a smile too. So we call it a 3.5. So no, I'm not saying everybody should hug everyone else all the time. Even if I didn't live in New England for 6 years, I wouldn't advocate for constant hugging. Hugging should be a choice for both parties. But on what basis is it made? On what basis do we welcome, affirm, trust others with something that feels like a hug? During that ministerial candidating week, a church member, in effect, held up 4 fingers to me and told me that this was based not on feelings about me, but about his decision to support and trust the process. This is the kind of trust that enables churches and ministers to have good working relationships. It's lovely to be in the honeymoon phase and have all those good feelings flowing around, but the long-term health of a community depends more on this kind of trust, this kind of faith. This is true of many sorts of relationships. Feelings change, they rise and fall. We know this as certainly as we know the sun will set tonight. This kind of trust is a decision to trust another with something specific, based only partially on information, sensory information, analytic or intuitive information. This kind of trust arises more from a decision to help create a future worth living. This is what couples experience when they marry, when they say, I do. They are wedding themselves not only to one another, but also to an uncertain future in which their shared commitment will be their guide. This is scary, risky, religious stuff, and it is closely connected with happiness. Our decision to trust should not ignore our feelings or other information. Our personal safety depends on our willingness to pay attention to our gut feelings and information about others. Please don't hear me as recommending that our trustful or mistrustful feelings be ignored. They are part of the information available to us, and they have their place. As Wendell Berry says, let us keep a place for our information, but know also that trusting is ultimately a decision among the most creative we can make. Wendell Berry writes, if we cannot work on the basis of sufficient information, then we have to work on the basis of an understanding of harmony. Harmony, music. What is the song, and how does our part fit in? How does this other person's part blend in? What is the nature of the situation? Most of the time we go walking around making unconscious private judgments about whether or not a person can be trusted, not stopping to realize how irrelevant is this question. Would I trust this person to be my babysitter? Perhaps not. But was I thinking of asking anyway? But here's a question relevant to encounters with strangers on the street. Will you trust this person with your smile, with a warm greeting of some kind, with a handshake or a hug or a kind observation about something they just did? No matter how little I know a person or how untrustworthy they might seem to be, I believe there is some act of genuine trust that can take place, an act that is relatively safe and yet enough of an emotional risk to be spiritually refreshing for both parties. To trust is to risk. Ruth Gendler writes, trust is at home in the desert and the city, with dolphins and tigers, with outlaws, lovers, and saints. She has a gambler's respect for the interplay between luck and skill. She is the mother of love. I remember a seminary class with Till Evans, who taught religious education at Starking School for the Ministry. In this class, somebody asked Till what she believed theologically. She sat back and paused. Then she answered, I believe we are held in the arms of a great trust. She said nothing of God, love, or truth. We are entrusted with life. What will we do with that trust? Trust is not a feeling. Trust is an action. It is specific. Trust is a gift. It is creative. When we offer one another the gift of trust, we create an opening for something greater. Trust frees us from our fears and helps us give birth to love. In this spiritual community, where we strive to be guided by truth and to live in and through and towards love, may we know the vital role of trusting. May we trust one another carefully, deliberately, joyfully. May we hear the music and invite one another to play our parts. Blessed be, and amen.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Our closing words is from number 648, Beginners. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much of it is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening to the sea of unbeing. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. Too much hurt that we have done to each other that cannot be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would just join our solitudes in communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete the gesture. So much is in bud. We have basked in the warmth and beauty of this flame and this community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, let us carry its glow within. Let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond. Blessed be.